Power. Everyone wants it. Some chase it through money, some through status, some through influence, and some people try to gain it by arguing with strangers on the internet at 2 a.m. Spoiler alert, that's not power. Today we're going to explore something far more interesting. Real power, the kind that comes from mastering yourself and understanding people. And for that, we'll look at two of history's most fascinating thinkers, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome while constantly reminding himself that ego is a terrible advisor, and Niccolò Machiavelli, the political strategist who basically wrote the manual on how power actually works, not how we wish it worked. One believed in inner discipline, the other believed in strategic awareness of human nature. And when you combine the two, you get something extremely dangerous. You get someone who rules themselves first. Section 1. The first rule of power: control yourself. Marcus Aurelius ruled the largest empire on earth, yet in his private journal, what we now call Meditations, he kept writing reminders like this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Which is interesting, because most people spend their entire lives trying to control outside events. They try to control what people think. They try to control outcomes. They try to control the uncontrollable. Marcus Aurelius understood something most people still haven't figured out 2,000 years later. If you cannot control yourself, power will destroy you. Power amplifies who you already are. If you are disciplined, power makes you formidable. If you are insecure, power makes you dangerous. If you are arrogant, power eventually humiliates you. Marcus spent years reminding himself not to fall into those traps, not because he was weak, because he understood human nature, even his own. Which leads us to our first question. Call to action. Let me ask you something. What do you think is harder, controlling other people or controlling yourself? Drop your answer in the comments, because most people talk about leadership, influence, and authority, but very few people talk about self-rule. Section 2. Machiavelli, the brutal truth about power. Now let's talk about Machiavelli. If Marcus Aurelius represents discipline, Machiavelli represents clarity. He looked at politics, leadership, and human behavior and decided to describe it honestly, which, historically speaking, made a lot of people uncomfortable, because Machiavelli pointed out something most people prefer to ignore. People are not always rational. They are emotional. They are self-interested. They are easily influenced by perception. And sometimes, they are unbelievably predictable. According to Machiavelli, power often belongs to the person who understands how people actually behave, not how we wish they behaved. That doesn't mean becoming manipulative, but it does mean not being naive. Machiavelli warned leaders about something incredibly dangerous: good intentions without strategic awareness. Because if you refuse to understand power, someone else will happily use it against you. Section 3. The dangerous combination: Stoicism plus strategy. Here's where things get interesting. Marcus Aurelius teaches us how to control ourselves. Machiavelli teaches us how to understand others. Put those together and you create something rare. A person who is calm under pressure, aware of manipulation, emotionally disciplined, strategically observant. In other words, someone who is extremely difficult to control. And this is where most people fail. They either become too naive or too cynical. Stoicism without strategy becomes passivity. Strategy without discipline becomes corruption. But together, they create balanced power. Section 4. Recognizing manipulation. Machiavelli wrote extensively about perception. He understood that people often judge leaders not by truth, but by appearance, which means manipulation exists, and pretending it doesn't is not wisdom. It's vulnerability. Marcus Aurelius, however, approached this differently. He believed that while you should understand manipulation, you should not allow it to poison your character. In simple terms, recognize the game, but don't lose your integrity playing it, which is harder than it sounds. Because manipulation often works by provoking emotion, anger, fear, insecurity. If someone can control your emotional state, they can influence your decisions, and suddenly, the person who thinks they are in control isn't. Marcus Aurelius solved this problem with one simple principle: pause, observe, respond deliberately, not emotionally. Which brings us to another question. Call to action. Have you ever noticed someone trying to manipulate a situation, at work, in friendships, or even online? What was the sign that gave it away? Write it in the comments. Your experience might help someone else recognize it too. Section 5. How powerful people carry themselves. Here's something interesting about truly powerful people. They rarely feel the need to prove their power constantly. Marcus Aurelius didn't shout about his authority. He wrote private reminders to remain humble. Machiavelli advised leaders to maintain dignity and controlled presence. In modern terms, powerful people are usually calm, not loud. They listen more than they speak. They observe more than they react. Meanwhile, insecure people often do the opposite. They argue constantly, they overreact, they demand validation, and they mistake attention for authority, which is a little like confusing noise with music. Just because it's loud doesn't mean it's impressive. Section 6. Power in difficult situations. Life eventually tests everyone. You lose opportunities. People betray you. Situations spiral out of control. And this is where philosophy stops being theoretical. Marcus Aurelius faced plagues, wars, political conspiracies, and still wrote about patience, discipline, and resilience. Not because life was easy, because life wasn't. Meanwhile, Machiavelli studied how leaders survive chaotic environments. His conclusion: preparation and awareness beat optimism every time. Real power shows up when circumstances become uncomfortable. Anyone can appear confident when things are going well. The real test is how you respond when they aren't. Do you panic? Do you react emotionally? Or do you remain calm enough to think clearly? Because the person who keeps their composure usually ends up controlling the situation. Section 7. The power most people ignore. Here's the strange part about power. The most important kind is rarely visible. It's internal. The ability to delay reactions, think independently, observe human nature, stay composed under pressure, maintain discipline when motivation disappears. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. Machiavelli understood its strategic advantage, and yet modern culture often encourages the opposite: instant reactions, emotional decisions, constant comparison, which is a fantastic way to lose control of your life. But if you can master your thoughts, your responses, your discipline, then suddenly you are no longer easily influenced. And that's when something interesting happens. You stop chasing power because you already possess the most important kind. Final thoughts. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but reminded himself to remain humble. Machiavelli studied power but warned leaders not to be naive. Two different philosophies. One powerful lesson. Power begins with self-rule. Control your mind. Understand human nature. Act with discipline. And move through life with quiet confidence rather than noisy insecurity. Because the person who rules themselves eventually becomes very difficult to control. Final call to action. Before you go, I'm curious about something. Which philosophy do you think is more important today? Marcus Aurelius's Stoic discipline or Machiavelli's strategic awareness of human nature? Let me know in the comments. And if you're interested in mastering both self-control and strategy, consider subscribing to Ruling Yourself, because the journey to power always begins with one decision: to rule your own mind first.